Hey guys, this is the next stage in my monk progression. So I started day 1 with a cold monk and I went into an ice strike, critical hit, attack speed build, and since the last 5 days or so I've transitioned into a stat stacker build, and this is what you see on the screen now. If you want to see progression to get up to this point, I will include links to my past progression videos in the video description as well, because this is a really endgame build. This is a stat stacker build and it requires to be roughly around level 90. You can do it earlier, but it doesn't really shine until you are very late level because you need a lot of passive points and there are some gear requirements as well. But I transitioned to this build because I managed to farm up to buy a Hand of Wisdom and Action, and I found a Pillar of the Cage Gods, so I think it was a natural thing to transition into. And you can see this build absolutely slaps. I'm only doing Storm Wave here, and it also has the modification that gives you 3 splits but at a reduction of 40% damage, and I'm just killing everything, just hitting Storm Wave. I don't need to use Tempest Bell, don't need to do anything. Storm Wave and everything dies. At this point also, I want to again give credit where credit is due. There are of course many people with stat stacker builds online, but the 2 people that helped me a lot were 2 people that I was discussing with on Discord, and that's Guy and Cylon. I hope I'm pronouncing the nickname correctly, but I will also include links to their builds in the video description that will help you out as well if you want to get started. If you have more questions on this build as well, please feel free to post in the comment section, or you can head off to the Path of Exile to Discord under the Monk discussion sub-channel, and there are many people there who are probably better at this than me who can help you out in answering your questions. I have a very comfortable time farming because Storm Wave has a very good range and AoE tied to it, and Herald of Thunder is very juiced as well and practically kills off enemies all the way to the end of the screen. On top of this, I'm playing on a controller as well, so less buttons is always a plus, and when mapping you really only need to hit Storm Wave as you go along. You can use of course Ice Strike and Tempest Spell. I still have that on my bar, but the Storm Wave does so much damage that it probably is the most efficient in clearing maps. But what about bosses? So let's take a look. For bosses, I use Ice Strike, Tempest Spell, and cast on Shock, Eye of Winter. And this is an area boss, and you can see Eye of Winter absolutely shreds the boss in a couple of seconds. But I suppose a tier 15 area boss isn't that impressive, so here's a fight on Zarok, the final boss in Trial of Sakamas. He died before he transitioned into his one-shot mechanic. Let's take it further. This is Zesh, one of the pinnacle bosses. Now, full disclaimer, this is Zesh only at tier 0 because I already have him unlocked at tier 0. And don't mind me there, I fat fingered the town portal by accident. Again, I play on a controller. Anyway, that's Zesh done. And this is Orof, the pinnacle boss in Expedition Encounter. Also at tier 0, this is actually the first time I'm fighting him. And he has 2 phases, so that's phase 1 done. I'm just waiting for him to transition to phase 2. And phase 2 is done. I guess tier 0 pinnacle bosses isn't also that impressive, so here's one at tier 4. This is a run done by a super juiced stat stacker. This is contributed by Guy and reproduced here with his permission. But this is how tier 4 fights look like when you are fully built with all the really expensive endgame uniques. Word of warning, don't blink or you'll miss it. Okay, paused it. This is also him, Guy, doing a simulacrum run. So just to showcase how an aspirational, really endgame with all the bells and whistles will look like. So I'll start off first with the requirements. Now you can go for a super budget stacker where the only unique required is the Pillar of the Cage God. And you can find these on trade for very cheap. I think they go for a few EX each. So you can even buy a couple and try to corrupt them like I did here. But I wouldn't recommend to start off with just this because if you happen to break the build by accident, then you have wasted a ton of gold respecking to a build that may not be as good as your last build. The bare minimum in my recommendation is to get the Pillar of the Cage God as well as the Hand of Wisdom and Action. This is farmable from Zesh, or you can buy one on the trade site for 6 or so Divine Orb at the time of making of this video. So it is some steep requirements in terms of cost, which is also why I wouldn't recommend to transition into this build until you are very late game and you are somewhere around level 90 or so with some resources built. The level requirement is also pretty key because you want enough nodes to travel pretty far on the passive tree. So I'll just zoom out on the passive tree here to give you an idea. You have to actually go all the way to the bottom to take this few passives right at the bottom here as well. And there is quite a lot of traveling required, which involves quite a bit of levels to get enough passive points. So once you have the Pillar and the Hand of Wisdom of Action and are about level 90, that's when you can probably safely make the transition. It's very hard to break the build because the gloves has a lot of strength behind it. So even with a very subpar build, where you allocate points wrongly, the build will probably still slap tier 15 and pinnacle bosses. If you do have the currency and the resource, I would also recommend before transitioning to pick up a Warrior body armor because it is also extremely good for the build. And one quick disclaimer in case you're not familiar with this body armor, it has 3 lines of stats. The first is just increased armor, evasion and all that. You want to have at least plus 260%, ideally the more the better, because for monks our spirit is also tied to the evasion and energy shield on the body armor, and warrior doesn't have a lot to begin with, so you want to help yourself by getting one with a higher percentage if possible. But the really important things are the remainder 2 lines, where I've gone for increased attributes and increased global defenses. The warrior body armor can vary in what you get on these 2 lines. You can have plus max life, you can have plus spirit, you can have plus elemental resistances per socketed rune. The plus attributes is mandatory. I think it goes without saying, this is a stat stacker build after all. I went also for 10% more global defenses, you get more energy shield that way. But alternatively, you can also opt for 10% more elemental resistances. That is a way for you to easily cap out your resistances, but you sacrifice some energy shield and evasion to do so, so it's a matter of personal preferences. Eventually, you of course want to get more, and this is really only where I'm at now, so I'm really just transitioned into the build a couple of days. I'm at the sort of like the very beginning of my stat stacking journey, but you can see that it's already a very powerful build as it is, and it will only get stronger all the way up to the aspirational build as you get more uniques. So I'll move on to the passive tree, and I'll start off with the ascendancy tree. Now the 4 mandatory points in my mind, firstly is getting Lead Me Through Grace. This solves your spirit problem and you don't need to find spirit anywhere else. The next would be I Am the Thunder, because this is predominantly a lightning damage build. To give you an idea, I'll show you my Ice Strike. It's currently sitting at only 240,000 DPS. Trust me, it gets a lot higher as you build stat stacking build more. But as it is, if you look at the damage breakdown, even though it's called Ice Strike, the cold damage is only 220 to 449. The lightning damage on the other hand is 1,900 to 19,000. So it actually does way more lightning damage than cold damage. And so that's why you want to pick up I Am the Thunder. As for the other 4 remainder points, I went with Meditate. Meditate is optional. It is an easy way for you to double your energy shield, and obviously if you're taking Chaos Inoculation, double energy shield is good. You can argue that you can also double your energy shield by taking Grim Fist, because that also gives you overcharge based on how many remnants you pick up. But you can't do that when you are fighting pinnacle bosses because there are no enemies to kill. So taking Meditate allows you to charge up at the start of every pinnacle encounter or map that you enter, and start off with having double your energy shield, which makes the runs a bit safer. At mid-level 90s, you really don't want to die anywhere because the penalty is quite severe. So I kind of like Meditate. The other point that I got is Sunder My Enemies. This is really good because you don't have to worry about elemental penetration or resistances at all. Just take this and stack critical hit, and you are pretty much set for the most part. Now, if you don't want to take Meditate, you can take I Am the Blizzard as well. And this is particularly true if you want to go a double Herald build. And I talk about the difference between a double Herald build and a single Herald build as I go through the passive tree. And first of all, also quick credits, I will include a link to both the double Herald and single Herald build in the video description. But the double Herald build was contributed by Cylon, and the single Herald build is by Ligai, so I don't want to take credits for any of them. But I will of course include the links to their builds if you want to check it out. Which build should you go for? It depends a lot on how early are you in your stat stacking journey and your personal preference. The double Herald build mixes cold and thunder, so you have roughly like a 30% cold, 70% thunder damage. And the good thing about that build is that it helps you to clear maps much faster, because your Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder will set up a chain reaction and even kill enemies off screen, so it's very easy. But your top end damage is a little bit lower than a single Herald build. By speccing out of Cold and I Am the Blizzard and going straight for I Am the Thunder, obviously allows you to pick up Meditate, which is good. But because you're focusing on a single element, your top end damage is actually a little bit higher. And it's actually easier to shock bosses because you are converting most of your damage, virtually 98% of your damage, into lightning damage, which makes it easier to shock and therefore also trigger cast on shock for bosses. So I would say it's more appropriate for really endgame content, but those are the two choices. Now, as you start off pathing through the passive tree, first thing first, forget all the branches, just focus on the road to path to the necessary end of the road. For every single +5 attribute, you should be taking either all strength or all intelligence. You take all strength if you are in the double Herald build, because you want to have physical damage that can be converted to both cold and lightning. You take all intelligence if you are like me and you go to a single Herald build. Why all intelligence? And in fact, going all intelligence gives you more damage than all strength. I have tested this out. It comes pretty close, but all intelligence is more damage, and the main reason is because of the Hoa unique. This gives you 1 to 10 lightning damage per 10 intelligence. If you choose to go into this build without Hoa, do not go all intelligence. You have to go all strength and play the double Herald build until you get this pair of gloves. But once you do, you can convert all your strength to intelligence, go a single element, and it is more top end damage. In particular, if you happen to find a pair of Hoa that is corrupted and give you 1 to 12 lightning damage instead, you'll be seeing roughly about, I think, a 20% increase in your damage, and I actually don't have that yet. So Again, all strength or all intelligence, as I've explained. You want to path all the way to the end and pick up the jewel slot here. And whether to branch up or down depends on whether or not you want to take Chaos Inoculation. Right here, so only take Chaos Inoculation if you have roughly about a 3000 energy shield or close to it without Meditate or Grim Feast. So that way you get about a 6000 energy shield once it's doubled, because it reduces your life by 1 and you'll be relying mainly on a little bit of evasion, about 50-60% evasion, and your energy shield. So you want this to be as high as possible. One easy way to get instantly 6,000-7,000, maybe even 8,000 energy shield is to buy a time loss jewel of Vorana, specifically Vorana. That jewel gives you a passive that changes your inherent strength bonus. Normally you get 2 HP per strength, but obviously if you're taking Chaos Inoculation, that doesn't matter, your HP is 1. But that changes the bonus to instead giving you 1% more energy shield per 2 strength. So if you have something like 300 strength, it gives you 150% energy shield, so you'll be swimming in energy shield. That is an easy way to get Chaos Inoculation. Otherwise, what you can do is focus more on energy shield for your helm and boots, and spend a few points picking energy shield bonuses here and down here as well, and here. So these 3 spots give you a lot of energy shield, and that's what I did. I'm now sitting at 4300 energy shield unbuffed and managed to take Chaos Inoculation that way. If you branch up, then you want to go all the way or to the top where you get Patient Barrier, which gives you 60% energy shield and 25 intelligence in Ingenuity. If you choose not to take energy shield, if you choose not to take Chaos Inoculation because your energy shield is low, then you save those points and instead you path downwards. Only take these 3 points in the quarterstaff tree, you don't need the rest. And then you path downwards to take Falcon Technique as well as plus 25 dexterity. This is all the dexterity you need. You do not need any more dexterity. Trust me, you hit pretty fast when you're at 200 something plus dexterity and Falcon Technique. Then you want to continue branching downwards all the way as you pick up more jewel slots until you come to the south end of the passive tree, so that you can pick up Polymathy as well as Jack of all trades. These 2 are required passives for the build. It gives you a lot of power, and this is why you want to be roughly about level 90 before you make the transition over. Once you fill in the roads, then you want to pick up the branches, and the first few branches you want to pick up is critical hit, because once again you've picked up Sunder My Enemies, and you want to have enough critical hit to ensure you can consistently bypass enemy resistance. So you pick up critical hit here, and then you pick up critical hit on the right hand side over here, and then you pick up critical hit at the top over here, assuming you've pathed to the top, and then you pick up critical hit here, and then you pick up critical hit here as well. By picking all this up and getting jewels, so a little sidetrack into jewels, because you'll get a lot of jewel slots. Get all sapphires that give you energy shield and critical hit chance. If you can get critical hit bonus on top, it's good, but those are pretty expensive. Get those and try to also corrupt your jewels to see whether you can get plus stats or plus resistance, such as this. So by stacking critical hit, you should be sitting at around 50% critical hit chance. That pairs nicely with giving you damage and elemental resistance ignore through Sunder My Enemies. Once you have that, then you can pick up bells and whistles. So I would recommend to pick up Controlled Metamorphosis Diamond. It sells in a trading site for roughly around 1 Divine Orb. I mean, you can start the build without it in case you are poor and on a budget, but once you manage to farm up 1 Divine Orb, then this is a pretty increase in power. But you must have Chaos Inoculation for this, so if you don't have the energy shield, just forget about Chaos Inoculation and forget about this, and just play with your energy shield and your HP. In that case, I would recommend go for a strength based build because you get more HP that way. But assuming eventually you have enough energy shield and then you transition into chaos inoculation and controlled metamorphosis, you pick this up because you want to pick up spaghettification. This gives you 7% more attributes, which is really huge, and taking the controlled metamorphosis allows you to pick up this node without puffing to it. The quick note here is that you must pick one with a very small ring or small ring. Do not take any other size in the ring, only very small ring or small ring, or you cannot pick spaghettification up. Once you slot this in, you can spec out of create this node here because you can also pick for the jugular without puffing to it. So you refund one node here and then you can pick up spaghettification without spending excess points. Once you have that, the rest is just any render points just goes to bells and whistles. I choose to have Killer Instinct because it pairs nicely with Chaos Inoculation. 1 HP does trigger the low life triggers, so I'm getting the 50% increased attack damage. And you can then pick up more defenses or more attack power along the way. Now, I did not pick up Coming Calamity. It sounds strange because you have Herald of Thunder, why not? Well, the main reason is that you need 3 points to it, and it actually doesn't really increase your damage all that much. If you look at it, it only increases your damage by 10-15k. This is the ice strike damage, the normal strikes on the right. Whereas for the same 3 points, I can pick up for the jugular, for Killer Instinct, and it's a much bigger damage increase versus Coming Calamity. So it's not really worth the 3 points there. For any remainder points, you can check out the build planner in the video description to see where you can path, but you can also path to more jewels. Jewels are king in a stat stacker build, and having more jewel slots allow you more jewels that you can actually stack. So there was a jewel slot down there. There's one more on the left over here as well that you can path towards to. And there's a couple along the way. You just need to spend like 3 more points going through attribute nodes, which isn't that bad anyway because attributes help, and then you can pick up more jewel slots. So let's talk a bit about the skill gems and support gems, and I'll start off with the most used DPS button when mapping, and that's Storm Wave. When your damage is high enough, Storm Wave is a very good skill to pick up because it clears from a distance and it has very strong AoE and combos very nicely with your herald skills as well, so it makes mapping pretty efficient. For Stormwave, I have Upheaval. This splits your wave into 3, so essentially a bigger AoE. Mobility helps you in mapping, so you just run forward while spamming Stormwave and you complete tier 15 in a couple of minutes. Long Shot gives you more attack damage because you'll be hitting enemies from far, so it's free damage. And finally, Ambush. So Ambush is pretty key here because for one thing, you have Sunder My Enemies, so by slotting in Ambush and having about 50% crit chance, your Stormwave bypasses resistances. The second thing is that it also kills 1 or 2 enemies quickly in a pack by having Ambush, which then triggers Herald of Thunder. So Stormwave by itself can kill monsters, but by having Ambush, you will trigger a follow-up attack from Herald of Thunder as well. So your Stormwave essentially has Herald of Thunder attached to it and have a lot of AoE capability, and that's what you use to clear mobs. So going to Herald of Thunder, I have Shock Siphon. This gives you a way to recover your energy shield if you need to. Innervate is more damage. Elemental Focus is damage for your Herald of Thunder. There is no drawback to this because Herald of Thunder itself cannot actually shock enemies, so you are getting essentially free 25% damage on the Thunders. And finally, Magnified Effect just for a bigger AoE. If you only have 3 skill slots, then just drop Magnified Effect, you don't really need it. Now what about bosses? For bosses, you have 3 skills that you use. The first is Ice Strike. You can go Thunder Flurry as well, but the reason why I went Ice Strike is mainly because I level as Ice Strike and I have Ice Strike with 6 links. It doesn't matter too much because either skill you use, you are applying thunder damage that comes from your Hand of Wisdom and action. What you really just want is a melee skill that builds combo points so that you can land Tempest Bell. When bossing, the big damage comes from Tempest Bell and Cast of Shock, not your Ice Strike, even though I have like 240,000 shit DPS on the Ice Strike. You can use Ice Strike as well, and during mapping you can also use Ice Strike. It will also trigger the Herald of Thunder, but you have to go melee range for that. So to me, I just use Ice Strike to build combo points so that I can drop Tempest Bell. So I take Martial Tempo for the attack speed, Primal Armament for elemental damage, Concentrated Effect just for damage on the Ice Strike, particularly good for bosses, which is what I'm using it for anyway. Inspiration for mana cost. If you want, you can also slot Inspiration onto Stormwave. It's a matter of personal choice. And finally, I recently swapped from Crescendo into Practice Combo, and it's a personal choice here. Crescendo is actually more damage on the Ice Strike, but again, in my mind, I actually do more damage by plopping Tempest Bell down, and Practice Combo actually lets me plop Tempest Bell down earlier and more frequently, so I prefer this over Crescendo. Tempest Bell is a big damage, so I have Overabundance. This is mandatory because you attack very fast. I'm at like 7 attacks per second, so you can quickly actually have 2 Tempest Bells up essentially, and Tempest Bell gets broken very quickly because of Cast of Shock, Eye of Winter. So you want Overabundance to never run out of Tempest Bell. Lightning Exposure is pretty good because again, predominantly your damage is lightning in a single stat stacker build, and even in a double Herald build, most of your damage is still going to be lightning, and Pinnacle bosses have a lot of lightning resistances. Although you can bypass with Sunder my enemies with a 50% critical hit, it is still a DPS loss because of the resistance, so Lightning Exposure is nice. The debuff can actually also bring resistances below 0 for those enemies without resistance, so it's never really a wasted support skill. And then personally, I like Leverage because I like crits and big numbers, and Close Combat because you'll be popping this near the boss anyway, so the damage bonus is pretty strong. You pair Tempest Bell with Cast on Shock, and Cast on Shock, Eye of Winter. Now this does eat your mana a lot. Try to get a level 13 Eye of Winter because higher levels will cost more mana. If mana is an issue, which shouldn't be because you have 500 intelligence, but if you find yourself running out of mana too often, you can swap this out for Lightning Ball at rank 9. It also does do a lot of damage pretty quickly to the boss, but the drawback is that you lose out on the critical weakness debuff. So Eye of Winter is preferred if you can stomach the mana cost. Chain and Energy Retention just to support Cast on Shock a bit more. So that's what you use to kill bosses. Finally are your defenses. So defenses, I have Meditate that I took. So Meditate, you can just slot in any support skill. I just use all the recommended ones. Doesn't really matter because you are not going to use this in the midst of battle most of the time anyway. And then you have Wind Waker. So Wind Dancer, sorry. So for Wind Dancer, try to get 20% quality as soon as possible because it gives you another stack, and it gives you 19% evasion per stack. So at 4 stacks, That is 76% more evasion, which is pretty huge. I like pin and lockdown. It's good defenses if you're getting hit. And I don't know what to stop for the last slot, so I just put in execute. But you can pretty much slot in anything else that you want. Doesn't really matter at that point. And then Grim Feast. So Grim Feast is really quite key. It allows you another way to hit double your energy shield. And then I have clarity and precision on Grim Fist.